of independent voters feel like society's level of acceptance has gone too far. So I wonder, Jonah, is it your sense that these GOP attacks will work in places like Texas and like Georgia?
I think they can work at the margins in terms of mobilizing members of the base. I'm not sure how much they're going to work on swing voters and independents, who probably hear a lot of it as more like name calling than substantive. But like Paxton in Texas is going to run a base turnout election, and doing the vegan thing and the transgender stuff will help with the turnout for the base.
How do you think, Lulu, a campaign focused on culture wars, like what we were just hearing there from Paxton, would be against a Democratic campaign focusing on, say, affordability?
But that's what actually Tellerico is focusing on. And so what I would say is that that's what they got at the moment. This is a very unfavorable year for Republicans. This is a tried and true playbook that they have deployed successfully, I will say, in other elections. And I think we have to see what the economic situation will look like in September when you start to see voters really tune into these races. You know, the low T stuff, the basically the masculinity argument that the GOP is trying to deploy is, I think, one that will hit with a certain voting base, but I don't think it's not 2024 anymore, and people are much worried about other issues, much more worried about other issues.
And you're precisely like 2024 was a powerful wedge against Kamala Harris, and President Trump used that and narrowcasted these culture war fights in a very precise way using technology. Mm-hmm. What's also interesting about this poll is the divide within the Democratic Party between what are urban white progressives versus the rest of the party, the more diverse set of part of the Democratic Party. There's a huge divide here between like the Warren and Bernie Sanders faction on speech, on going too far on some of these cultural issues. And that's, I think, an interesting thing that we're seeing the separation there, as well as the overall debate about speech and debate between the parties. And the independents look a lot like Republicans in saying, no, we should let people speak their minds more freely than what is currently being policed, and the Democratic Party being
But what's being
outlier.
Policed anymore? Yeah. I mean, honestly, have you seen what the state of our public discourse is? Like, what exactly is being policed? I certainly don't see any evidence that anything anymore is being policed.
You know, I think of Leon Cass, the bioethicist, who had this wisdom of repugnance, right? And he talked about how we have these initial reactions to things that come up that are different to us. Now, people will push back and say, oh, that is shaped in many ways by like our cultural context, not just by like what's going on inside of us. Mm-hmm. I don't count on people reaching to their higher selves. No. I think a lot of people are still going to be motivated by whatever is happening inside their gut, which is why it's important that Tallarico said, I found some of those things to be cringy, because you've got to put yourself on the same side as everyone else, that this is not necessarily where I want to have this fight, so you can get on stronger ground. And the stronger ground is on the economy, and for him to also talk about values and his spiritual faith and why that infuses his politics. And that's what he's up to,
yeah,
is to sort of get himself on the same side as the voters.
We're also seeing these Georgia and Texas are so very different, right? You basically have to have Republicans act like Republicans in Texas. Georgia's interesting because you're going to see the Republican nominee for governor in Georgia win and spend whatever it takes to win. And then you're going to see John Ossoff try to carve out this pathway to the Senate, to re-election to the Senate, to a presidential race. And I think what we're seeing with the way his campaign events look, his messaging, his approach to media, his approach to what works and gets viral action is all about 2028, not about 2026. Really interesting to watch how precise they're being with this campaign. It's one of the best run campaigns in the nation today.
Also, the number one thing I do know about this Tallarico attack, it tells you they're worried about him. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump is attacking him because they're nervous.
Well, and because Paxton is a terrible candidate.
Terrible. I was about to say, what ground is Paxton standing on? I mean, if the worst you can say about Tallarico is that he's a vegan, I mean, let's look at
he's also super weird.
He's weird.
Culturally out of touch with Texans. Like this is.
I agree with that.
It was great. He had a nice little ride. This is going to be his high water mark.
And they don't believe that, or else they leave him alone.
But it's because we have a deeply flawed Republican candidate who I think is a bad person, who I will probably call senator after the next election. Like that's what happens. But Georgia's a far more interesting race to focus on than this Texas.
And at Sunday, you're going to call Paxton the defendant. But
once again, you mean
I just want to say, when we're saying it's not 2024 anymore, that's both chronologically true and more metaphorically true, but also some of this culture war stuff just doesn't play the same way in midterm elections because the president has been, for the last 25 years, seen as an avatar of the culture war for the entire nation. And so, like, people are kind of voting on whether to have a Catholic or Protestant on the throne kind of thing. And it doesn't work the same way in state and local elections because you're not talking about the entire country, you're talking about a specific race in a specific state.
That's an interesting point. All right, stay with us. Coming up,